Memories, scattered shreds, facts serve only as landmarks to fill our agenda because the real events happen in us. It is like a resonance in what is called our soul. Alain, the great French philosopher, said he didn't like reminiscences. He knew how to forget and start anew. Forget? How mistaken he is, this great man whom I admire. No, what one has lived through only seems to vanish. Past experiences sink in the depth of our own self, where new experiences join them, layer upon layer. They form a perpetually renewed matter which enriches our inner life as well as the life we receive from the outside. I thank heaven. What heaven? My own heaven, all blue, sometimes peach color, sometimes night blue. I am thankful for my hands and for the little brain I have, because I never was very intellectual.
The words just spoken by Agnes Moorehead come from the as yet unpublished journals of Wanda Landowska, one of the great names in music of our century. Miss Landowska's fame rests not only upon her extraordinary musical performances, but on her scholarly efforts, which resulted in the revival of the harpsichord and renewed interest in the men who composed for it. Our program today stems from a performance by Miss Moorehead quite recently at the Poetry Center in New York City. That performance, conceived by the Deerfield Foundation, was based upon the many notebooks and writings of Landowska, as translated and edited by Denise Restu with the assistance of Robert Hawkins. It is our pleasure now to present Agnes Moorehead in selections from the intimate reminiscences of Wanda Landowska.
Raised in a country of great plains, melancholy but tame plains, I would as a child lie flat on my stomach in the pasture between our house and the Nita River and listen for hours to the noise, full and wet, of the ruminating cows. This sonority seemed perfectly beautiful to me. Deep in the herbage, attentive, I was awaiting another sound which I knew just as well. That of a thick tuft of grass pulled off for the cow with an obstinate motion of her head and lifted to her already opened mouth. Then this mouth would make seesaw motions. Its inside was of a fading pink color. My own cow, black, smooth, with a milky spot on her belly, stopped sometimes to look at me fixedly with her enormous eyes. She knew that she was the one who did masticate with the greatest art, and that she was the one who taught me my first lessons of sonority. I often think of her when I mix the two 8-foot registers on the two keyboards of my harpsichord. I was looking with veneration on this dribbling, oscillating mouth, on these brown, fixed eyes, and my childhood nostalgia nestled in the hollow of the black and smooth belly near the mauve udder. I began to play at the age of 4. My first teacher was a kind and indulgent man. He allowed me to browse freely in the music which pleased me, and what pleased and fascinated me particularly was the music of former times. I still remember the delight I felt when I heard for the first time Le Tambourin of Rameau. When I was still a timid and young girl, I was sent abroad to study counterpoint and composition. What did I learn? Nothing, really nothing. I was refractory to rules and laws. As soon as they were imposed on me, I stiffened, terrified. My music paper was covered with exercises in which I had no interest at all. Counterpoint? Yes, but through the direct channel of Bach. I sang the voices separately with limitless joy. I punctuated them and they became lively. They sprang forth. Were my teachers inadequate? Or was I a bad pupil? To the consternation of my parents, I ran away from Berlin in 1900 and went to Paris. Beset as I was by my love for the music of the past, my first objective, once I settled in Paris, was to study this epoch in an historical musicological way. Because of this keen interest of mine, I was soon introduced to the circle of musicians of the Schola Cantorum, the famous school founded in 1896 for the revival of plain chant and of all vocal and instrumental music prior to the 19th century. There I met the most remarkable musicologists and musicians of the time, among them Albert Schweitzer. I had the rare privilege of living in the midst of these wonderful men who honored me with their friendship. I often discussed musical matters with them. Also, having read innumerable treatises and manuscripts and progressing in my studies, I realized that the keyboard works of the 17th and 18th centuries ought to be played on the instrument for which they'd been originally composed, the harpsichord. This idea took complete possession of me, and I decided to carry it out. When I told my friends of the Schola Cantorum of my intention to devote myself entirely to the music of the past, most of them encouraged me, but very few were in favor of playing it on the harpsichord, that old tin pan instrument, as it was called then. Why? Because in Paris, attempts at reviving the harpsichord had already been made a few years earlier without real success, poor performances on poor instruments. No wonder that the musicians were discouraged. Undaunted, I started to look for an instrument to play on. A few modern reconstructions existed, but they were a far cry from the kind of harpsichord I was dreaming about. At the beginning, however, I used them as they were. Then I visited most of the museums of Europe and studied carefully extant 17th and 18th century keyboard instruments. Adorned with rich carvings, decorated with faded colors and dim gold, they appeared like phantoms. Formerly magnificent, now mute forever. What was the voice of these harpsichords about which the musicians of former times spoke with such delight? To make them live again, to give them jubilant or pathetic accents, to evoke polyphonic purity, to make the coupled keyboards resound, to sing with lingering tones the amorous cantilenas, such was my dream, multiple and vast dream. But it wasn't enough to dream. I understood that I had to start a campaign and to reconstruct a harpsichord similar to what it must have been in Bach's time. The friendly understanding of the directors and engineers of the piano firm of Pleyel made possible this reconstruction according to my suggestions. At a Bach festival in Breslau in 1912, I played for the first time my beautiful new Pleyel harpsichord. I remember how the day of the concert on stage, a Pleyel engineer was frantically making the final adjustments. In 1908, to commemorate the anniversary of Carriere's death, I played the harpsichord in Rodin's studio. The master was a great lover of ancient music. He had the kindness to show me his collection of antique sculpture. It was a sight to behold, watching him stop at each carving, looking at it